So in discussing aggression, I actually want to look at it in a very similar way to how we looked at altruism, because in many ways you can think of altruism and aggression as two sides of the same coin, right? So if one is pro-social behavior, altruism, the other is anti-social behavior, aggression. So let's compare them with the same four theories. So evolutionary psychology, and then the three classic sociological theories of structural functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. So in evolutionary psychology, there's a biological basis to aggression, right? Aggression is a survival strategy within the context of natural selection. Some big influencing factors are genetic predisposition, survival instincts, and competition for resources, right? So you can think of animals that literally will, attack one another, maybe for access to mates, access to food, or it's a predator-prey situation, right? So it's very easy to understand why aggression might be evolutionarily advantageous, right? If you're in a jungle and you're from a species of very docile creatures that are never aggressive, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be some other more aggressive animal's lunch, right? And humans, of course, are mammals. Now we have higher order, cognitive faculties that hopefully can allow us to override maybe some of these aggressive instincts. But evolutionary psychology says, hey, we also are mammals. We've also evolved over the eons with a need for survival skills that often include violence and aggression. So there's a reason that to some degree aggression is, exists in societies, because it probably was a survival advantage at some point throughout our histories, even if it's less necessary now. But even today, you can picture situations where the ability to defend yourself or your family or your loved ones might be an important skill or trait to have. So examples of aggression in evolutionary psychology could be, as I mentioned, competition for mates, different dominance behaviors, who's the alpha, right? Or territorial defense, similar to like nation states, right? We have defense forces. Now let's take a look at functionalism. So this is, again, the theory that is very much interested in looking at how society continues to function, what holds it together, what institutions and features in the system allow that society to continue functioning over time. So, a main focus when we're talking about aggression is how does aggression maintain or disrupt social order? Aggression is a potential disruptor, but also could be a stabilizer of social cohesion, right? A state could use aggression to, defend its sovereignty, or a police force to stop a riot, right? So aggression could be, from a functionalist perspective, used to maintain stability. But of course, a riot is also aggression, right? They could be looking at ways in which aggression decreases the stability in a society or disrupts its social cohesion. So the influencing factors in this theory are going to be social norms, regulation mechanisms, and societal stressors. If there's, say a big economic recession, there's a chance aggression will grow. Or think about during the, COVID-19, that was a big societal stressor. And many in this theory were then not surprised to see an increase in social activism on the other side of that, because the idea is that maybe there's a lot of pent up social aggression and anxieties that kind of come out into some of these different movements that we saw in the wake of COVID-19. Now, examples in structural functionalism would be a breakdown of social norms, collective aggression like riots, or in some cases, regulated aggression, like in sports, right? Football, we know, is pretty dangerous. People get hurt, but it has a kind of potentially stabilizing, feature for society. That if we have these, or maybe take like martial arts, right? If there are these highly regulated ways in which we let aggression out, then perhaps it doesn't have to come out in even more violent or socially disruptive ways. So now let's take a look at conflict theory. So to conflict theory, they would want to know how aggression is shaped by power and inequality. They would analyze aggression within a context of social tension, competition, and struggle for resources. Influencing factors are economic disparities, power dynamics, and class struggles. And really a key concept there is the class struggle. competition between the dominant and subordinate groups in society, class positionality being the central one. Though there could be other forms of aggression. Maybe it's based on gender, patriarchy, right? And so there's a kind of battle of the sexes, or could be based on race. It could be based on any feature in which a society divides and categorizes itself, as long as in conflict theory, it can identify the one that is the dominant group compared to those that are more subordinate or more stigmatized. So examples would be exploitation. So economic aggression would be an idea that conflict theorists would very much be highlighting. Suppression of dissent, maybe how the state uses aggression to quash weaker groups. And so it's unlike functionalism that might be viewing the state's ability to regulate aggression by using aggression as a feature of stabilizing the society. Conflict theory will say, hey, maybe this is just making power inequalities worse. And then lastly, symbolic interactionism, looking at how aggression is constructed and enacted through daily interactions. What do we count as aggression? One thing might just be considered play, but to another, it might be considered bullying, right? Friendly hazing ritual versus somebody being intentionally mean or spiteful. Not everybody might perceive those interactions in the same way. So symbolic interactionism examines aggression as socially constructed through interactions and shared meanings. Influencing factors are social roles, personal relationships, and ongoing social processes. Key concept are shared symbols, meanings, and everyday interactions and labeling. And examples would be bullying, family violence, peer influence, and group behavior. So with symbolic interactionism, you would literally be thinking, what does one subculture versus another, or one societal group compared to another, identify and classify as aggression? Because at the micro level, these are just, it's language, it's meaning, it's shared values. And so, in one culture, two close friends might get in a fist fight, and then later they just make up and they're fine and they move on. But in another culture, that might be an extreme violation of the kind of group solidarity, could lead to someone pressing charges and the total end and dissolution of the relationship, right? So in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, it's going to be the same as the strengths and weaknesses as applied to altruism. At an evolutionary psychology level, strength is the explanation of biological basis for aggression, but it overlooks a lot of the cultural and social features. If we're talking about structural functionalism, it looks at social functions of how a society might have greater stability due to some types of aggression, but it can oversimplify human behavior by simply looking at everything as some component of the system trying to stabilize itself. In terms of conflict theory, the strength is that it, highlights conflict, especially when we're talking about aggressive conflict. But the weakness is that it's always looking for a perpetrator. And so it can overlook maybe some positive social aspects of aggression, which we've already mentioned. There could be some. Maybe it's a defense of family or community. Maybe it's sanctioned sporting events that include aggression. And then at the symbolic interactionist level, the strength is, the emphasis of the micro interactions, the kind of subjective meaning making that humans do around concepts even like aggression. But the weakness is that because it's so micro, it can overlook broader societal structures that the other theories tend to emphasize. But taken as a whole, I think these four approaches give you quite a varied understanding of altruism and aggression, and are quite helpful to use in tandem with one another.